locked doors, moving tracks, one missing man. There are rules that make travel feel safe. Doors lock when the train moves. Tracks remain sealed beneath steel and speed. Between stations, nothing enters, nothing leaves. These rules are not questioned. They are trusted. On this journey, every door was locked. Every corridor was sealed. Every mechanism worked exactly as intended. The train did not stop. No alarms sounded. No emergency procedures were triggered. And yet, a man was missing. He had boarded in plain sight. He had taken his seat. He had been counted as present. Then, somewhere between one station and the next, with doors locked, tracks moving, and no possible exit, he was no longer there. No broken seal explained it. No open door allowed it.
Take care.
No witness
Text
marked
me
the
when you
moment it
arrive.
happened. Only
I
the
will.
quiet
See
certainty
you
that a
soon.
system built to prevent loss had continued forward without him. This is not a story about escape. It is a story about what happens when all safeguards succeed and someone still disappears. Chapter 1. The System That Never Opened. The train departed at 12:11 a.m., not rushed, not delayed, exactly as scheduled. The platform lights reflected off the metal sides of the carriages in clean, unbroken lines. Passengers boarded with the quiet efficiency of people who trusted routine more than curiosity. Bags were lifted, tickets were folded away. Conversations faded as the doors closed and the familiar mechanical seal engaged. The doors locked. A soft indicator light near the ceiling confirmed it, steady, unquestioned. Between stations, the train became a sealed system. Nothing entered, nothing left. That was the promise built into the design. He boarded in the middle of the carriage. Not first, not last. Just another passenger absorbed into the flow. A man stepped aside to let him pass. A woman pulled her coat inward so it wouldn't brush his sleeve. A teenager lifted his backpack slightly, making room. These were not gestures of recognition, only reflexes of accommodation. They acknowledged him without remembering him. He chose seat 11C beside the aisle. He placed his bag neatly beneath the seat in front of him and sat without adjusting his posture. No hesitation, no restlessness. He occupied the space with the quiet finality of someone who did not expect to move again until arrival. The train lurched gently, then began to glide forward. Outside, the platform slid away into darkness. Inside, the carriage settled into its nighttime rhythm. Lights dimmed to their late-hour setting. The low hum of motion replaced the sounds of boarding. The conductor entered moments later. He walked with practiced calm, clipboard tucked against his arm, eyes scanning without lingering. His job at this hour was not enforcement, it was confirmation. Making sure the system matched itself, seat by seat, row by row. 10A, 10B, 10C, all occupied. Row 11, 11A, 11B. He glanced at 11C. Their eyes met briefly, not in greeting, not in curiosity, just enough to register presence. The conductor marked the seat and moved on. Ink touched paper. That mark mattered more than memory. The train gathered speed. The tracks beneath became a steady, unbroken rhythm. Outside the windows, darkness pressed close, punctuated only by distant lights that passed too quickly to name. Inside, passengers relaxed into stillness. Some leaned their heads back. Others stared into their phones until sleep overtook them. A few closed their eyes immediately, trusting the journey to carry them forward without participation. The man in seat 11C remained still.
The view is
He did
incredible.
not check his phone. He did not adjust his posture.
Perfect.
He did not look toward the
So
doors.
peaceful.
He sat as
Is
though
this the
movement no
Express?
longer concerned him.
Yeah, next stop is
Time
downtown.
passed without edges,
Excuse me,
not measured
coming
in minutes,
through.
but in sensations. The sway of the carriage, the warmth of recycled air, the sound of metal moving exactly as designed. The train did not hesitate. It did not question itself. The conductor completed his first walkthrough and returned to the front of the carriage. Everything aligned. The count matched
Excuse
the
me,
bodies.
is this
The
the
doors
Express?
remained sealed.
Yeah,
indicator
should be
lights
there in a
steady.
few.
Next
Later,
stop,
How
Central
much later
Station.
was difficult to say. He began his second check. Redundancy was comfort, proof that nothing had shifted unnoticed. He walked the aisle again. 10A, 10B, 10C, occupied. Row 11, 11A, 11B. He stopped. Seat 11C was empty. The conductor did not react immediately. Absence alone was not failure. Passengers stood, they stretched, they visited restrooms, they moved between carriages when permitted. Still, something about the emptiness held his attention. He looked down. The bag beneath the seat was gone. He checked the floor. Nothing. He glanced toward the restroom indicator. Green, unoccupied. The intercarriage door showed its steady red light, locked since departure. No log indicated it had been opened. The train had not slowed. No announcement had been made. No door had disengaged. The conductor returned to seat 11C and looked at it carefully. The cushion lay smooth. The armrest was aligned. There was no sign that someone had stood up recently. That detail unsettled him. Most movement left traces, shifted fabric, faint warmth, a subtle disruption that suggested recent presence. Here, there was nothing. He checked his clipboard again. Seat 11C was clearly marked. He remembered marking it. That memory was precise. He turned to the passenger seated across the aisle. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "Was someone sitting here earlier?" The man looked at the seat, then nodded. "Yes." "When did he leave?" The man frowned slightly. "I didn't see him get up." The conductor asked another passenger, then another. The answers aligned too neatly. "He was there. I didn't see him move. No doors opened." No one remembered a moment. No sound, no decision, no interruption. The conductor stood in the aisle longer than necessary, listening to the steady motion beneath his feet. The train continued forward, sealed and confident, its safeguards intact. Locked doors, moving tracks, no exits. The system had not failed. And yet, a man who had boarded in plain sight, who had taken his seat,
Whoa,
who had been
that was a
counted,
big
was
one.
no longer there.
Tell me about it. I
Seat
almost
11C
fell.
remained empty.
Happens every day.
And somewhere between departure and the next station, without breach or alarm, the journey had already proven something unsettling. That even a perfectly sealed system could continue forward, having lost someone, without ever needing to explain how. No door had opened. The conductor did not stop the train. The decision settled quietly, almost on its own. Emergency procedures were designed for disruption, alarms, breaches, failures that demanded immediate acknowledgement. This situation offered none of those signals. The train moved smoothly. The doors remained sealed. Every system reported normal operation. Seat 11C was simply empty. He stood beside it longer than necessary, listening to the even rhythm of steel on rail beneath his feet. Motion filled the space where explanation should have been. The faster the train moved, the more convincing the illusion of control became. He checked the restroom first. The door opened without resistance. Bright light revealed clean surfaces, dry flooring, and unused fixtures. No locked stall, no sound, no trace of recent presence. He closed the door gently, as if noise itself might disturb the
Just
fragile
confirming your
calm that
meal
had settled over the
choices.
carriage.
I'll have the chicken.
Next,
The pasta for me,
intercarriage door.
please. Perfect,
The
thank
indicator
you.
light remained solid red, sealed
Thank
since
you.
departure. The log showed no
Thank
interruption,
you.
no override, no manual release. The train was a closed system, and yet the count no longer matched. The conductor returned to seat 11C and looked at it again, slower this time. The cushion lay smooth, the fabric unwrinkled, the armrest perfectly aligned. The seat did not look vacant, it looked unused. That distinction mattered more than it should have. Earlier, absence could be explained as movement, someone standing, stretching, stepping away briefly. Now, the space resisted that logic. There was no suggestion that a body had occupied it recently enough to leave warmth behind. The conductor removed his clipboard and scanned the page deliberately. Every other mark corresponded to a person, every number aligned. Except one. Seat 11C remained circled, confirmed, counted. The ink was his. He remembered the moment clearly, the brief alignment of eyes, the automatic motion of his pen, the certainty that followed. That mark was not a guess. It was verification. The system had accepted the man, which meant the system should not have released him. The conductor began asking questions again, this time more carefully. He kept his voice low, professional, unalarming. You remember someone sitting here? Yes. Did you notice him stand up? No. Did you hear anything unusual? No. Passengers answered calmly, without urgency. No one whispered, no one leaned closer. They responded and returned to their own thoughts, as though the questions themselves were the most disruptive part of the exchange. The conductor noticed something else as he listened. The passengers' bodies were adjusting. A woman shifted her bag slightly into the empty space beside seat 11C. A man stretched his legs farther into the aisle than before. No one guarded the seat, no one avoided it. The environment was redistributing itself. He leaned briefly against the partition near the front of the carriage and closed his eyes. The train's motion remained constant, confident, unquestioning. Outside, darkness offered no reference points, no stations, no landmarks, no interruptions. They were between places, and whatever had happened
All
had
set
learned
with
how
that?
to exist
Yes, thank you.
Excuse
The
me,
conductor
is this
checked
the
his watch.
landing card?
there. Time
Yes,
advanced
that's
Just
normally.
the
the front,
Seconds
please.
passed without hesitation. The disappearance had not slowed the clock. That unsettled him more than anything else. If time had not reacted, then the system did not recognize this as a failure. He took out his notebook. Not the clipboard, but the one he used when memory alone felt insufficient. Seat 11C. Confirmed boarding. Confirmed absence. Doors sealed. No log entry. Writing the words steadied him, anchored the contradiction somewhere tangible. But even as he wrote, he noticed how difficult it was becoming to picture the man clearly. He could recall posture, not face. Position, not expression. Memory offered structure without detail. The man was becoming an outline, a placeholder. The conductor returned to seat 11C and sat down. The cushion compressed easily beneath his weight. The seat accepted him without hesitation. There was no sense of intrusion, no instinctive feeling that the space belonged to someone else. That frightened him. He stood again almost immediately, heart steady but heavy. Across the aisle, two passengers spoke softly. "I remember him sitting there," one said. "So do I," the other replied. "Then why does it feel like he was never meant to stay?" The words were not spoken with fear. They were spoken with curiosity. The conductor felt the meaning settle slowly. This was not denial. It was adaptation. An agreement forming without discussion, without intention, shared through behavior rather than words. The passengers were not choosing to forget. They were choosing not to insist. The conductor understood then that disappearance did not require secrecy. It required momentum. As long as the train continued forward, as long as no mechanism demanded a pause,
the absence could remain suspended, never fully acknowledged, never fully resolved.
Movement smoothed contradiction. He looked down the aisle again. Passengers were calm. Lights glowed steadily. The train moved forward without hesitation. Seat 11C remained empty, and with each passing minute, the emptiness felt less like a problem and more like a condition the journey had already accepted. The conductor understood with growing unease that the most dangerous moment had already passed. Not when the man vanished, but when the train continued, locked, sealed, and confident, without needing to explain where he had gone. Chapter 3. The space the system accepted. The conductor stopped
Here you
asking
are,
how
sir.
it had happened.
Thank you.
The question no longer fit the shape of the problem.
And for you, ma'am.
There was no mechanism
you.
to inspect, no sound to replay, no moment anyone could isolate and hold up for examination. Whatever had occurred had not behaved like movement. It had behaved like subtraction, clean, efficient, and already complete. Seat 11C remained empty. The conductor stood in the aisle and looked at it from several angles, as though perspective might restore resistance. From the front, it appeared ordinary. From the side, it blended into the row. Nothing about it pulled the eye anymore. That change unsettled him more than the disappearance itself. Earlier, the empty seat had felt wrong, an interruption in a pattern that demanded correction. Now, the pattern had adjusted. The carriage appeared balanced again, as if it had quietly learned how to include absence. Passengers were calm. Some slept. Others stared at their phones or out the windows, faces relaxed with the trust that comes from being carried forward without effort. The atmosphere felt settled, not tense. The train had absorbed the anomaly and moved on. The conductor approached a passenger seated 2 rows ahead. "Do you remember the man who was sitting in 11C?" he asked softly. The passenger nodded. "Yes." "What do you remember about him?" The man hesitated. "That he was there." "Anything else?" He frowned, searching. "No, nothing specific." The conductor thanked him and moved on. The answers repeated themselves with unsettling consistency. Yes, he was there. No, nothing stood out. No, no one saw him leave. Memory confirmed existence, but refused detail.
This is the
The
way to
conductor
fly.
returned to seat 11C and stood beside it,
Look at those
forcing
clouds.
himself to hold the image of the man in place. He tried to reconstruct him from fragments, the way others had stepped aside as he boarded. The brief alignment of eyes when the seat was checked, the stillness of his posture once the train began to move. But the image would not sharpen. It dissolved the moment he tried to focus on it. He sat down in the empty seat, The action startled him, not because it felt wrong, but because it didn't. The cushion yielded beneath his weight without hesitation. There was no instinctive sense of intrusion, no feeling that he had occupied someone else's place. The seat accepted him as though it had been waiting. He stood again immediately. The problem was no longer that the man was missing. The problem was that the space he had occupied no longer remembered him. The conductor removed his notebook and opened it again.
The page fell naturally to the entry he had written earlier. Seat 11C, marked occupied. The handwriting was clear, certain, undeniable. The notebook had become the only place where the man still existed with definition. Everywhere else he was thinning, flattening into agreement. Across the aisle, two passengers spoke quietly, unaware they were being overheard. "I know there was someone there," one said. "Me too," the other replied. "But I can't picture him." "Maybe he didn't matter," the first said, not cruelly, just practically. The conductor felt the weight of the words settle. In a system built on efficiency, significance required friction. What did not interrupt the flow did not justify preservation. The man had boarded quietly. He had sat still. He had not demanded attention, and now memory was responding accordingly. The conductor walked the aisle again, slower this time. He noticed how eyes slid past seat 11C without pause, how bodies adjusted instinctively, legs stretching, bags shifting, using the empty space without acknowledgement. Earlier, the absence had been questioned. Now, attention itself was avoiding it. That shift marked a boundary. The conductor leaned against the partition near the front of the carriage and listened to the steady hum of the train. The sound was constant, reassuring, indifferent. Motion did not question contradiction. It erased it. The train did not know someone was missing. It only knew that it was functioning correctly. He addressed the carriage one final time, keeping his voice calm. "We're verifying seating. If anyone remembers the passenger who was sitting in 11C, please let me know." Several heads nodded. No one spoke. They remembered. They simply did not feel compelled to elaborate. The conductor understood then that the disappearance had crossed an invisible threshold. It was no longer an unresolved event. It was becoming a non-event. Reality was not denying that the man had existed. It was demoting that fact, lowering its importance until it no longer required interruption, explanation, or care. The conductor remained standing, aware that he was now the only person still holding the contradiction with any weight.
This is
Everyone
the focal
else had
point.
released it, not emotionally,
Understood. I'll note
not
that.
deliberately.
Agreed. What
but
about
efficiently.
contingencies?
Memory,
We'll cover
he
them.
realized, was not passive. It required maintenance, and maintenance required effort the journey no longer rewarded. Seat 11C remained empty. The train continued forward through the darkness, sealed and confident. Outside, there were no landmarks to measure progress. Inside, the carriage felt complete, its internal logic settled. The man had been seen, but being
This
seen
chair
had not been enough
symbolizes
to
our
anchor him.
historical legacy.
And without a moment
Yes,
to hold
but
on
we
to,
must consider
without
practical
sound,
needs.
movement,
A fair
or
point.
pause,
We need a balanced
the witnesses
approach.
were already
Agreed.
losing more than the
This
passenger.
chair
They
represents
were
a
losing the
pivotal
expectation
decision
that his
point.
absence
I
should
see.
matter at
The
all.
notes confirm its importance.
I agree. It's the
Chapter
logical
4.
next step.
Authority without a breach.
Look at
The announcement
big
arrived without
airplanes
urgency.
outside.
We will be arriving at the next station shortly. The conductor's voice carried through the carriage with practiced neutrality. It was the kind of announcement meant to reassure, to confirm that structure still governed the journey, that movement had direction, that uncertainty would soon give way to order. Seat 11C remained empty. As the train slowed,
The steady rhythm beneath the floor softened into a controlled glide. Platform lights emerged through the windows, bright and uncompromising, flooding the carriage with clarity. Night retreated under inspection. Shadows withdrew. Details sharpened. The doors opened. Sound rushed in. Footsteps on concrete. Distant announcements. The metallic echo of another train braking on a neighboring track. The outside world asserted itself immediately, confident and procedural. Stations existed to correct things, to
All
verify
aboard!
counts, to
Right
restore
this way.
alignment.
Thank you.
2 railway officials boarded. They moved with calm efficiency, clipboards in hand, expressions
move.
shaped
The
by
schedule is
routine
tight.
rather than suspicion.
Understood. The cars
These were
are
people
waiting.
accustomed to systems behaving correctly. Their presence carried authority without threat. The conductor spoke quietly. Passenger confirmed present after departure is no longer on board. No stop. No door access. One official nodded. Seat number? 11C. They approached the seat together. The official
Wow,
nearest
look
the
at
aisle
that
stopped
speed!
and looked down at
It's
it.
incredible,
expression
right on
registered
time.
Here comes the
Concern.
horn.
What a ride
This
that
seat is
must
empty,
be.
he said. Yes, the conductor replied. It wasn't earlier. The official crouched, checked beneath the seat, then straightened. Any belongings left behind? No. Witnesses? Yes. Any disturbance? No. The official made a brief note and closed his clipboard. From what we can see, everyone currently on board is accounted for. The words landed gently but decisively.
Thank you, sir.
But someone is
My
missing,
pleasure.
the
Welcome
conductor
aboard,
said
sir.
carefully.
All
The
clear,
official tilted
ready
his
to
head
depart.
slightly as though
Acknowledged.
clarifying a
Safe
misunderstanding.
travel.
Missing from where? The question struck harder than denial. From the train, the conductor replied. The official shook his head, not dismissively, but patiently. There's no one unaccounted for here. Every passenger present has a ticket. Every ticket has a seat. The system spoke through him. Not hostile, not defensive. Final. The officials conducted a brief walkthrough of the carriage, scanning faces,
Please,
checking numbers,
have a seat.
confirming alignment.
Thank you, sir.
Passengers watched quietly,
Shall we begin?
curious but untroubled.
Yes, let's proceed.
No one appeared anxious. No one demanded explanation. The inspection concluded. "Thank you for your cooperation," one official said. "We'll be on our way." They stepped back onto the platform. The doors closed. The whistle sounded. The train began to move again. As the station slid away into darkness, the conductor understood what had just happened.
Yes, look at
The
that big
absence had been
airplane.
reviewed and accepted.
It's going to
Passengers
take off
relaxed
soon.
visibly, shoulders lowered. Someone exhaled softly. A woman adjusted her coat and leaned back. Whatever tension had existed dissolved the moment authority
Look,
withdrew.
our gate's on the board.
Seat 11C
Oh, gate
remained
15,
empty.
finally.
But
Go?
now,
Yes,
it
buddy,
no
we're
longer felt like a
going.
problem
Let's get
waiting to be
ready.
solved. It felt sanctioned.
Yes.
The
that's
conductor
our
returned
plane.
to the
We'll
front
get
of the
on
carriage,
soon.
posture
Look how
unchanged,
excited you
expression
are.
composed. Inside, something irreversible settled into place. The system had examined the contradiction and found it acceptable. The train pressed on through the night, its motion steady and confident. Outside, darkness returned, uninterrupted and indifferent.
Here
The
it
conductor
comes!
looked down the aisle again.
Wow,
Passengers
it's so
were calm.
fast.
Seats were filled. Order had been restored, except for one precise detail. Seat 11C remained empty. And now, no one expected it to be otherwise. The conductor felt the sharp edge of urgency dull, not because he had accepted what had happened, but because there was nowhere left for urgency to go.
No report to escalate, no authority to appeal to. The disappearance had passed through the only corrective mechanism available to it and emerged unchanged. He thought briefly of the man, not as a face, but as a certainty that had once existed. That certainty now felt distant, fragile, like a memory recalled too many times. The conductor understood then that the journey had crossed a threshold. Before the station, the absence had been a contradiction. After the station, it had become a condition. The train did not need to understand it. It only needed to continue.
Seat 11C remained empty as the night express carried on. Locked doors intact, tracks moving beneath steel and speed, safeguards unbroken. And somewhere between departure and arrival, authority itself had quietly agreed that nothing was wrong. Chapter 5. The calm that followed approval. Once the station disappeared behind them, the night express did not feel unsettled. It felt resolved. The train gathered speed with the smooth assurance of something returning to its intended rhythm. Platform lights thinned into pale streaks and vanished. Darkness reclaimed the windows, and with it came a quieter certainty. The certainty that inspection had ended, that whatever remained had been deemed acceptable. Seat 11C remained empty. The conductor stood near the front of the carriage, hands resting loosely at his sides, listening to the familiar hum of systems working exactly as designed. He waited for a delayed reaction. Raised voices, whispered concern, a ripple of unease that might justify the tension still sitting beneath his calm exterior. Nothing came. Passengers resumed their routines with disarming ease. A man slipped on headphones and leaned back, eyes closing almost immediately. A woman loosened her scarf and folded it neatly into her bag. Someone opened a book, turning pages with slow, deliberate care. No one mentioned the missing man. Not because the subject was forbidden, because it no longer felt relevant. The conductor walked the aisle again, slower than before. He was no longer searching. He was observing. Posture throughout the carriage had softened, shoulders lowered. Bodies reclaimed space with the confidence of people who believed the journey was unfolding exactly as intended. When he reached seat 11C, he stopped. Earlier, the empty seat had felt like a fracture, a flaw in the sentence of the carriage that refused to be ignored. Now it felt more like punctuation, present, but no longer interrogative. He studied the cushion. It did not look recently vacated. It looked simply unused. That realization unsettled him more than any unanswered question. The environment had adjusted faster than he had expected. The space where the man had sat was already being treated as surplus, available, neutral, quietly invisible. A passenger nearby stood to stretch and paused beside the empty seat. The conductor watched closely, anticipating hesitation, confusion, perhaps a question. The man glanced down briefly, frowned as if puzzled by his own pause, then moved on. He did not sit. He did not ask why the seat was empty. The conductor felt something tighten, not fear, but the sense of witnessing a process complete itself without instruction. He continued his walk, checking tickets he had already checked, answering questions that required no thought. Everything aligned, everything balanced. The system felt calm because it no longer carried contradiction. When he reached the end of the carriage, he realized something else. He had not taken out his notebook. The absence of that impulse startled him. Earlier, the notebook had been his anchor,
proof that the contradiction existed somewhere solid, somewhere resistant to the smooth logic of motion. Now, the need to document felt unnecessary, almost indulgent. The system no longer required evidence.
It had already decided. The conductor sat briefly in the fold-down seat near the partition, observing the carriage from a distance. From here, seat 11C barely registered. Surrounded by occupied seats, it dissolved into the pattern, indistinguishable from any other empty space that might exist on any ordinary journey. Passengers' gazes slid past it naturally, bodies adjusted around it instinctively. They were not avoiding the seat, they were forgetting it. Across the aisle, two passengers spoke softly. "I always feel calmer after inspections," one said. "Like things settle into place." Her companion nodded. "Yeah, once someone official checks, you stop worrying." The conductor closed his eyes briefly. Stop worrying. The words settled heavily, because by every rule he knew, something had not been resolved at all. It had simply been approved. He reached into his pocket and touched the notebook without opening it. The thought of crossing out the entry for seat 11C came easily, too easily. One clean line would restore symmetry to the page. The record would agree with the world. The ease of the thought frightened him. He left the notebook where it was. A passenger near the front asked quietly, "Are we still on schedule?" "Yes," the conductor replied. And it was true. The train was precisely on time. The disappearance had delayed nothing. That fact carried its own quiet menace. If the loss of a person did not slow the system, not even briefly, then the system had no reason to resist such losses. Continuity mattered more than completeness. Function mattered more than presence. The conductor looked down the aisle again. Passengers rested. Lights glowed steadily. The train moved forward without effort. Seat 11C remained empty. But now, its emptiness felt permanent, not because anyone had declared it so, but because the journey had learned how to proceed without questioning it.
Wow, look at those
The
clouds.
conductor understood
So
with
beautiful.
unsettling clarity
This is
that the
so
system had not
relaxing.
failed. It had succeeded. It had absorbed an anomaly without interruption, and in doing so, it had revealed something deeply disturbing: that existence within a perfectly functioning system was conditional. That presence was preserved only as long as it did not demand attention. He leaned back and exhaled slowly. He was no longer waiting for the man to reappear. That expectation had dissolved somewhere after the station. Now, he was waiting for something else, for the moment when even he would stop feeling that the absence required resistance. The night express pressed onward through the darkness, smooth and assured. Seat 11C remained empty, and with each mile the journey grew more confident in its correction, carrying forward what remained and leaving behind what no longer fit, without ceremony, without alarm, and without ever acknowledging that anything essential had been lost at all. When the system stopped asking, the shift revealed itself quietly. The conductor noticed it not in thought, but in habit. He walked the aisle for another routine pass, posture relaxed, steps guided by muscle memory rather than intent. He checked seat numbers automatically, eyes moving faster than his awareness. Row 10, row 11. He passed seat 11C without slowing. 3 steps later, the realization arrived, not sharply, not with alarm, but like a delayed echo. He stopped, turned. Seat 11C was empty. That fact did not disturb him. What unsettled him was how little effort it had taken to forget to look. Earlier in the journey, the empty seat had demanded attention. It had pulled at his awareness like a loose thread, forcing itself into every count, every scan of the carriage. Now it rested quietly among the others, its absence fully integrated into the pattern. The system had learned. Passengers slept or rested with the loose stillness of people who trusted the journey to continue without interference. A man near the window breathed evenly, his forehead touching the glass. A woman 2 rows back shifted in her seat and sighed, adjusting her coat without waking. No one reacted to the empty space. No one guarded against it. The conductor stepped closer and rested his hand on the seat back, testing the moment with touch. The fabric was cool, neutral. There was no lingering warmth, no subtle impression of recent use, nothing to suggest that the seat had held a body earlier in the night. He withdrew his hand slowly. Across the aisle, a passenger stirred and opened his eyes briefly. His gaze drifted across the carriage, passed over seat 11C without pause, then moved on. He closed his eyes again. Nothing followed. No confusion, no hesitation. The space had been fully accepted. The conductor felt a quiet unease settle into his chest. This was not resolution. It was agreement. He reached into his pocket and removed the notebook. The weight of it felt heavier now, as though he were holding something the journey no longer needed. The pages fell open easily to the familiar entry. Seat 11C, marked occupied. The ink remained dark and certain, a physical remnant of a version of reality that no longer aligned with the carriage around him. He tried to reconstruct the man again, the way others had stepped aside as he boarded. The small bag placed beneath the seat. The stillness of his posture once the train began to move. But the details refused to assemble. What remained was certainty without image, memory reduced to a statement without shape. The conductor closed the notebook and pressed it lightly against his thigh, grounding himself in its solidity. Around him, the carriage breathed evenly. The train moved forward with unwavering confidence. The system was no longer compensating. It had finished adapting. The conductor understood then that something more unsettling than disappearance had occurred. The system had not lost the man. It had redefined the conditions under which loss mattered. Seat 11C was no longer empty
Strings
because
more
someone
intensity
vanished.
now.
It was simply empty.
Cristo cellos!
And emptiness, the mind understood instinctively,
Release.
required no explanation. A passenger nearby murmured in sleep and turned toward the window. Another adjusted a blanket. The carriage felt whole, not full, but complete in the way systems feel complete when nothing resists their logic. The conductor leaned against the partition and closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, he forced himself to look at seat 11C as though seeing it for the first time. What he saw was not absence. What he saw was permission. The world had allowed the correction to stand. He imagined the end of the journey, passengers disembarking under daylight, the carriage emptied, cleaned, prepared for the next run. The seat wiped down, its history erased not by force, but by irrelevance. He imagined telling the story later, quietly, carefully, only to hear it sound implausible even to his own ears. A man disappeared on a locked train. No doors opened, no alarms sounded, no system logged an error. Already the story felt thin. The conductor realized then that the most fragile part of any system was not its safeguards. It was memory. Rules enforced continuity. Memory enforced meaning. And memory, unsupported,
Strings, bring
learned
out
to let
that
go.
bay!
He walked the
crescendo,
aisle
now
again,
build it
deliberately
up.
this time, testing himself.
Brasilian forte.
He slowed as he approached row 11, waiting for the familiar pull of attention. It did not come. Seat 11C passed beneath his gaze like any other empty seat, available, unremarkable, unburdened. Maintaining the memory now required effort, and effort was something the journey did not reward. The system favored what moved smoothly, what required no correction, no pause. The conductor stopped beside the seat anyway, not because it demanded attention, but because he needed to know whether he still could give it. He could, barely, but the effort felt artificial, like holding on to a thought that no longer fit the shape of the world around it. The night express pressed onward through the thinning night. Outside, darkness began to loosen toward dawn. Inside, the carriage rested in quiet equilibrium. Seat 11C remained empty, and with each mile, the conductor felt the resistance drain. Not because he accepted what had happened, but because remembering it had become work. The disappearance was no longer an event. It was an optimization,
on the adagio.
and the system,
Brass,
efficient and
prepare for the
untroubled,
crescendo.
carried forward,
And now,
confident that
the
whatever
full
no longer
ensemble.
needed to be remembered would not be. Chapter 7. The Last Person Still Counting. By the time the darkness outside began to thin, the night express had reached a state of perfect balance. Not silence, stability. The conductor stood near the front of the carriage, posture relaxed in a way that no longer felt deliberate. His body had adjusted ahead of his thoughts, shoulders loose, breathing steady. The vigilance that had sharpened every sense earlier in the journey had dulled into habit. Seat 11C remained empty. He noticed it now only when he reminded himself to look. That realization carried a quiet weight. Earlier in the night, the empty seat had pulled at his attention, demanding explanation. Now the carriage appeared complete, without effort. The pattern had closed around the gap. The system no longer resisted it. Passengers began to wake as dawn approached. Phone screens lit briefly, then dimmed. A man rubbed his eyes and checked the time. A woman folded a blanket and placed it neatly into her bag. Night behavior gave way to morning behavior with seamless inevitability. No one mentioned the missing man. Not because they were suppressing the thought, because the thought no longer arrived. The conductor walked the aisle again, answering a quiet question about arrival time, nodding politely as a passenger shifted to let him pass. Every interaction reinforced the same conclusion. The journey felt correct. When he reached row 11, he slowed. Seat 11C sat open, unclaimed, offering nothing that demanded explanation. He rested his hand lightly on the armrest, then withdrew it, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. Across the aisle, a woman opened her eyes and glanced at him briefly. Curiosity flickered, then faded.
Rough night.
She did not look at the
You could
seat.
say that.
She did not
The
ask
little
a
one
question.
is finally out.
The conductor moved on.
Almost,
He
buddy.
understood then that he was the last person still holding the contradiction, not as a mystery to solve, but as a responsibility to maintain. Everyone else had released it without noticing. Memory, expectation, and behavior had aligned quietly, efficiently. Only his notebook resisted. He returned to the front of the carriage and removed it from his pocket. The cover was worn smooth from years of routine use. He opened it to the page he knew by heart. Seat 11C. The entry remained. Ink, dark, legible, undeniable. The record had not changed. The world had. The conductor realized the notebook no longer functioned as documentation. It had become opposition. As long as the entry existed, some version of the missing man endured, not in the carriage, not in shared memory, but in refusal. He closed the notebook slowly. He did not cross the entry out. Not yet. Outside, the sky lightened.
Strings ready.
Fields emerged from shadow.
Crescendo
Roads appeared,
now.
edged with certainty.
And
Daylight
release.
insisted on order in a way night never did. It stripped ambiguity away and left only what could be verified. The train did not slow. The conductor understood then that the system no longer required his vigilance.
Everything that could adapt already had. The absence no longer threatened coherence. What remained was choice. Not about what had happened, but about what would be remembered. He imagined the final station. Passengers stepping off, absorbed instantly back into their lives. He imagined filing paperwork, or deciding there was nothing to file. He imagined telling the story later, only to hear it sound implausible even to his own ears. A man boarded, a man vanished, between stations. Without witnesses willing to insist on detail, the story would erode into something smaller. Fatigue, miscount, a late-night error smoothed over by routine. The conductor felt no pride in resisting that erosion, only exhaustion. Memory required effort. It demanded friction. The world did not reward friction. It rewarded continuity, smooth passage, clean record, no interruptions. He looked down the aisle once more. Passengers were calm. The carriage was orderly. The journey was intact. Seat 11C remained empty. And for the first time, the conductor wondered,
that's
not
in.
with fear,
Great.
but with quiet
Please
resignation,
take your seat.
whether
Will do.
insisting on remembering served
Excuse me.
any purpose at all. If no one else required the contradiction, if the system functioned better without it, was memory an obligation or an indulgence? The night express continued forward, its motion unwavering. The tracks carried it smoothly into the growing light, indifferent to what had been left behind. The conductor stood still, feeling the question settle into place. He was no longer guarding against disappearance. He was guarding against forgetting. And with each mile, he understood more clearly that forgetting would be easier. The journey did not ask him to decide. It simply continued. Seat 11C remained open, waiting. Not for a passenger, but for the moment when even the last person still counting would decide that the number no longer mattered. When the doors opened again. The announcement came without emphasis. "We will be arriving at the next station shortly." The conductor's voice moved through the carriage as it always had, calm, measured, designed to guide rather than alarm. The words did not ask for attention, they instructed transition. Bags were lifted from the floor, jackets were pulled on. Phones appeared briefly, glowing like small confirmations of morning before being tucked away again. Seat 11C remained empty. The train slowed, the constant vibration beneath the floor easing into a controlled glide. Platform lights emerged through the windows, bright and unforgiving, washing the carriage in clarity. Night loosened its hold. Shadows retreated. Details sharpened. This was the moment the conductor had been anticipating. Between stations, uncertainty could hide inside motion. At a stop, it had nowhere to go. The doors opened. Cool air entered first, followed by sound. Footsteps on concrete, distant announcements, the echo of another train braking nearby. The station asserted itself immediately, confident and procedural. Stations existed to correct things, to count, to verify. Passengers stood. They formed a loose line in the aisle without instruction. No one rushed. No one hesitated. Arrival followed rules everyone knew. The choreography of departure unfolded with practiced ease. The conductor positioned himself near the door and watched closely. If the disappearance had been an error, if the count had been wrong rather than altered, this was where the system would correct itself. Someone would pause, someone would look around, someone would hesitate at the empty seat. Passengers passed seat 11C. A woman stepped around the space without looking down. A man lifted his bag from the rack above and turned smoothly into the aisle, brushing past the seat as though it were no different from any other. Another passenger
Please
rested a
ensure all
hand briefly
bags
on the
are
seat
stowed
back to steady
securely.
himself, then
Is
continued
there room
forward.
for this one?
Each interaction
Yes,
treated the
plenty
space
of
as neutral,
space.
functional, unremarkable. The conductor felt a quiet tightening in his chest, not panic, not alarm, but recognition. This was not avoidance, it was acceptance.
Seat 11C was passed again. Still nothing. When the last passenger stepped onto the platform, the carriage emptied completely. The noise drained away, replaced by a different kind of silence, clean, exposed, and without expectation. The conductor remained inside. He walked slowly down the aisle, his footsteps echoing now that no bodies remained to absorb the sound. Without people, the carriage appeared smaller, more exact. Rows aligned perfectly, light reflected evenly across metal and fabric. Nothing seemed disturbed. He stopped beside seat 11C. In full station light, the seat
Need a
resisted
hand
interpretation.
with that?
Same fabric,
No, thanks.
same wear,
I've got it.
Okay,
same
let me
alignment
know.
as every other seat in the row. It was impossible to understand why this space had ever felt important at all. He placed his hand on the seat back. It was cool, neutral. There was no warmth, no impression, no trace of recent occupation. Nothing to suggest that a person had ever occupied this space in a way that demanded preservation. The conductor stepped briefly onto the platform and turned back to look through the open doors. From this angle, the interior presented itself as complete. The empty seat did not interrupt the pattern. It did not suggest loss. The world had looked inside, and it had found nothing missing.
Please take your seats as quickly
The whistle
as
sounded,
possible.
the doors closed. The train
done
prepared to
here.
depart again. The conductor re-entered the carriage as the train began to move, feeling the familiar shift beneath his feet. The empty space absorbed the motion without resistance, as though it had always been prepared for it. Outside, the station slid away. With it went the last opportunity for correction. The conductor understood then that arrival had not challenged the disappearance. It had confirmed it. Light, witnesses, and structure had all been present, and none had objected. The train gathered speed once more, carrying empty seats and mechanical certainty forward into the thinning night.
Wow,
The
look at
conductor
that
leaned lightly
view.
against the partition,
beautiful.
suddenly aware
So
of how complete
peaceful.
the
I
carriage
could
felt.
do this all day.
He tried
Me
one
too.
final time to recall the man's face. Nothing came. The effort produced no resistance. He knew the man had boarded. He knew the man had been counted. But memory no longer offered an image, only a statement. The past was adjusting. Seat 11C remained empty as the night express continued onward. Not suspiciously, not ominously, simply so. The conductor felt a quiet conclusion settle inside him. The doors had opened. The system had checked. Reality had reviewed the absence and found no fault. Whatever
Ticket,
had
please.
been lost between departure and
There you
arrival
go.
would not be returned by stopping.
Thank you,
The train
sir.
pressed onward beyond the reach of the station lights. Seat 11C waited, not for the man who had vanished, but for the journey to continue, as though nothing had ever needed to be corrected at all.
All right, tickets ready.
The record learns
Ticket,
to
please.
agree. Morning established itself fully as the night express entered the final stretch of its route. Sunlight cut clean lines across the carriage now, revealing dust motes in the air and the faint scuffs on the floor that only appeared under honest light. Outside, the landscape resolved into certainty: fields, service roads, low buildings preparing for the day. Daylight carried authority. It suggested that what survived inspection was meant to remain. New passengers boarded at the next stop. They entered with purpose, coffee cups in hand, headphones already in place, eyes fixed on destinations beyond the train itself. Tickets were presented. Seats were chosen quickly, with the confidence of people who assumed the system would behave. Seat 11C remained empty. No one asked if it was available. No one hesitated beside it. The conductor observed from the front of the carriage, hands loosely folded, feeling neither urgency nor relief. This was the point at which the night's contradiction should have reasserted itself. New eyes meant new memory. New
Thank you,
bodies
sir.
meant new friction.
Thanks.
But the absence produced none. Passengers settled. A man placed his bag beneath seat 11B without glancing toward the aisle. A woman slid into 11D and leaned back, her elbow brushing the empty armrest beside her without acknowledgement. The space accepted them effortlessly. The conductor began his check. He moved down the aisle beneath full daylight, clipboard balanced against his forearm. Names matched faces, numbers matched bodies. The system responded exactly as designed. Row 10 aligned, row 11 approached. His pen hovered over the page, only briefly. Seat 11C, unoccupied. He marked it. The motion completed itself before thought could interfere. Ink touched paper with quiet confidence. The record updated.
Tickets,
The
please.
conductor froze, pen still resting against the page. He stared at the mark. It was clean, decisive.
Take care. I'll call
Unquestioned.
you.
The record now matched the carriage. He had not debated the decision. He had not paused to consider what the mark replaced. The correction had passed through him as naturally as breathing. Slowly, he straightened and closed the clipboard. Something loosened inside him. Not relief, not peace, but finality. The tension that had followed seat 11C through the night drained away, not because the mystery
Have
had
a
been
pleasant
solved,
journey.
but because
Thank
it no
you,
longer
officer.
required maintenance.
After you, ladies.
The notebook in his pocket
Thanks.
felt different,
Come on in.
lighter. Not because it contained less, but because it no longer resisted the world around it. The conductor leaned against the partition and watched the carriage fill with morning behavior.
I love how the scenery
Conversations
changes so
murmured softly.
fast.
Someone
Yeah, it's
laughed
like a
at
movie
message on their
back
phone.
there.
Another
Exactly.
passenger adjusted
Coffee
a
makes
watch,
it better.
already aligning
Definitely.
themselves with the
I
hours
love how
ahead.
the scenery changes
Life
so
had resumed
fast.
its forward motion
Yeah,
without
it's like a
pause.
movie back there.
Seat 11C
Exactly.
blended
Coffee
seamlessly
makes it
into the
better.
Definitely.
Definitely.
row. Avoided, not emphasized, simply available. A passenger in 11D stretched her legs slightly, her foot drifting into the open space beside her. The movement was casual, unconscious. She did not look down. She did not apologize. The conductor felt no
Wow,
alarm.
look at that
moment
view.
passed
So
unnoticed.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's
He
incredible.
understood
So
then
green.
that the
I could
disappearance had
travel like
completed
this
its transition.
forever.
Me
It
too.
was no longer an unresolved event. It was no longer even a remembered one. It had become background. The train curved gently, sunlight sliding across the carriage walls. The motion felt smoother now, unburdened by contradiction. Whatever resistance had existed earlier had been released. The conductor thought briefly of the man, not as a face, not as a presence, but as a statement. A man boarded the train. He was seen. He was counted. Those statements were still true, but they no longer carried weight.
Truth, he realized, was not what the system preserved. Continuity was. The system did not care what had been true once. It cared only that everything aligned now. Seat 11C remained empty, and for the first time since the journey began, the conductor understood there was nothing left to guard. The record had not been corrected. It had learned to agree. The train slowed slightly as it approached the final station. Announcements echoed through the carriage. Passengers gathered belongings, movements guided by habit rather than anticipation. The conductor remained still, observing the end of the journey with detached clarity. He understood that if the system no longer required him to remember, then memory itself had become optional, an inefficiency, a friction point that no longer served function. The Night Express continued toward its destination, carrying forward a version of reality that no longer included the missing man, nor the question of where he had gone. Seat 11C stayed empty, and with every mile closer to arrival, the absence grew quieter, not erased, not denied, but absorbed so completely that it no longer distinguished itself from the ordinary spaces people passed every day without thought. Chapter 10. The Train That Needed No Witness. The final station arrived without ceremony. The Night Express slowed beneath a broad canopy of steel and glass, brakes releasing with a controlled sigh that carried no urgency. Morning light flooded the carriage now, clean, even, undeniable. This was the hour when journeys ended, when counts were meant to settle into certainty. The doors opened, passengers stood, gathered their belongings, and moved into the aisle with practiced ease. Wheels rolled softly along the floor. Brief apologies were
Right on
exchanged.
schedule.
People stepped off the train and were immediately
Next
absorbed
stop,
into the station,
Paddington.
into exits, platforms, schedules, and lives already moving forward. Seat 11C remained empty. No one paused beside it, no one hesitated, no one looked back. The conductor stood near the door, watching the final movements complete themselves. Each passenger passed him intact, present, accounted for, confirmed by the simple act of being seen again.
This one's mine.
Their existence
Great,
was sealed
now
the
for the
moment they
others.
crossed the
The
threshold.
blue tag is next.
When the last passenger disembarked, the carriage emptied. The silence that followed was not heavy. It held no questions. It was the quiet that exists only between uses, clean, functional, temporary. The kind of silence that prepares itself to be replaced. The conductor remained inside. He walked slowly down the aisle, his footsteps echoing.
All
now that there
aboard,
were no
next
bodies
stop
left to
approaching.
soften the sound.
Please keep arms and
Without
legs
people,
inside.
the carriage appeared
Enjoy
smaller,
the scenic
more
views.
exact. Rows aligned perfectly. Surfaces reflected light evenly. Nothing suggested disruption. He stopped beside seat 11C. In full daylight, the seat resisted interpretation. Same fabric, same wear, same alignment as every other seat in the row. It was impossible to understand why this space had once demanded attention at all. He rested his hand on the seat back. There was no sensation, no warmth, no impression, no resistance. Nothing to suggest that someone had occupied this space in a way that required preservation. The conductor withdrew his hand and reached into his pocket, removing the notebook one final time. The cover was worn smooth from years of repetition. He opened it, and the pages fell naturally to the place his fingers knew without looking. Seat 11C. The entry remained. Clear, legible, undeniable. The ink had not faded, but the meaning had. He considered crossing it out. The thought arrived calmly, without urgency. One clean line would align the page perfectly with the world beyond it. The record would become efficient again. He did not do it. Not out of defiance, not out of loyalty, but because he understood that crossing out the entry would not correct anything. It would only complete the disappearance. As long as the mark remained, a trace of contradiction endured. Not enough to interrupt the system, not enough to demand explanation, but enough to suggest that something had once passed through the journey without being carried forward. He closed the notebook and returned it to his pocket. Outside, the station continued its routine. Another train arrived, another departed. Announcements echoed and faded. Timetables held. The world functioned exactly as expected. The conductor turned off the carriage lights one by one, the interior dimming gently. He walked to the door and stepped onto the platform, pulling it closed behind him. The night express stood ready for its next departure. Clean, orderly, complete. No report would be filed. There was nothing left to escalate, nothing left to resolve. By every measurable standard, the journey had been successful. The conductor paused and looked back through the glass. The man had boarded. That fact had once been certain. The man had vanished. That fact had once demanded explanation. Now, both truths existed without friction, one thinning quietly, the other already absorbed. The train did not need to resolve the contradiction. It only needed to continue. As the conductor turned away, he understood the final shape of what had happened. The night express had not lost a passenger. It had lost the need to remember one. Without someone insisting on the discrepancy, the absence no longer required acknowledgement. Reality had not erased the man violently or dramatically. It had simply moved forward until there was no one left to insist that he had been there at all. The train departed again on schedule, carrying new passengers who would never know that someone had once occupied a seat that now felt entirely ordinary. Seat 11C remained empty. Not as evidence, not as warning, but as quiet proof that existence within a perfectly functioning system depends not on truth, but on being remembered long enough to interrupt the journey. Some journeys end with answers, others end with agreement. A man boarded the train, he was seen, he was counted, and then the system continued. The doors never opened, the tracks never broke, the records stayed clean. Perhaps the most unsettling truth is not that someone disappeared, but that nothing required him to be remembered. That in a world built on movement, continuity matters more than certainty, and order matters more than truth. So the next time you travel, when the doors seal and the train moves forward, take a moment to notice the empty seats, because once no one insists on the question anymore, the answer quietly disappears.